Today we're going to talk about EMFs, but not in the traditional way. If you've seen other lectures on EMFs, we applaud them, we thank them, but we're going to go over some new material. And what you're going to hear today is a breakthrough study of 2021, a scientific evidence of why EMFs are so important to autism itself. And then we're going to go over some new EMF knowledge, information, and solutions. And if you're new to EMFs in general, we're going to cover the basics, but very quickly, and get on to some more exciting, new, important stuff that we listed here. So, quickly in the beginning, we'll review this stuff. So, common bad EMF sources. And EMFs, quickly, is radiation. And radiation comes off everything that's electrical. And if it's sending information through the air, whether it's audio, video, or whatever, that is going to have radiation. And so all of these things to the right are major common sources of this radiation. It absolutely is having an effect on our health, and it's possibly directly linked, as you'll see, to autism. And then all these things in the blue boxes you can also see are things to avoid. The most common, everybody probably already knows: cell phones, cell towers, low orbit satellites. Everything Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is important, but look at the dark blue box in the middle. There it says fans and air purifiers. The reason that's a different color is because it's something that a lot of people don't realize, and it's also a different kind of EMF. So although it may not be as bad as a router, it's harder to fix because of the kind of EMF it is. So get them, we'll talk more about this in a minute, but this is something you want to special note on. Now, the biggest problem of the list you just looked at that's not being talked about today is 5G low orbit satellites. There's thousands of them up there now. The big problem started right in the end of 2019, right around when the pandemic started, which is pretty coincidental, or not. Now, right now there's thousands, but they're planning on having 30 to 50,000 up there total. Because this started, we had to double the strength of our personal products and double the strength of our home protection products when back in about the turn of the COVID starting. So we're pretty sure that this new form of radiation is the big reason why EMFs have gotten so bad in the last 2 years especially. Now, if you're curious if EMFs are bad for you, because you always hear the experts saying, well, not experts, but let's say the industry saying, well, there's no evidence. Well, that's simply not true. It's insane. It's offensive to say that. There are so many thousands of studies. You just use your Google machine, like a comedian said in the movie, and get on there and you can start looking them up. We'll give you some information of where. Now, this is a great place to start. So if you're new to EMFs and you want a lot of information really quick, in 5 minutes or less, read this. Go to this page, bioinitiative.org/conclusions, because it's going to give you a summary of almost 2,000 studies on this one page. This one page from an organization that's been around for many years. They don't sell anything. They're not funded by anybody with an agenda one way or another. This is a great place for non-biased information. Now, what do these studies say are the common biological effects from EMFs? Well, pretty much matching all the serious chronic problems that we see today in health. Fatigue, sleep issues, headaches, immune system imbalances. On down the list, you see autism on the list, says Dr. Martin Pall and others. Children being more affected than adults, which is really a bummer. But here, look at this last one on the list. Look at it, because if you don't have symptoms, that's what we call these above, the effects, symptoms or effects that you can recognize from EMF exposure. This massive amount of DNA damage and cellular damage is happening to you. Okay, that's proven. We know of over 50 DNA damage studies ourselves, and the cellular damage studies we've done ourselves. We've seen it. The president of our company's seen it with his own self, most of this stuff. So this is happening, and it's on a big level, so we hope you pay attention and address it. Now, children are more affected. According to the Bioinitiative, they say 2 to 2.5 times more DNA damage and more effects to children. And here's a scary point. women's eggs get 10 times the DNA damage than adults do, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is a woman's eggs are getting 10 times the damage, and they don't have the ability to repair DNA damage like we do. So if you're having a baby girl, her eggs in the womb are getting so much damage that she may never have kids when she's grown up in 20 to 40 years later. Okay, so this is affecting our reproductive systems like crazy. I wish I had a lot more time to cover that, but this is a big one. Now, how much EMF radiation is there here at this conference that you're all around? And now let's just talk about cell towers alone. You can go to antennasearch.com. We plug in the address, and this is the result we got the other day. There's 111 towers within a few miles of where you're sitting. There's almost 700 antennas. That's just cell towers. There's scatopoles. There's low orbit satellites. There's phones, cell phones galore just in this room. I mean, this is just a small piece of it. So this is a lot of radiation we're talking about. Now let's just cover two studies. Again, this is sort of review or for beginners, so we're going to be really quick. But study number 1 was the most expensive and longest study ever done on cell phones. Paid for by the U.S. government and run by it. It was a $30 million study over 10 years. It was just concluded a few years ago, and it used 2G and 3G exposure, so it didn't even use 4G, 5G modern smartphones. It didn't even use that, and it used a consistent wave, not an erratic one, so it was designed to be like not damaging at all. Yet what was the result? There was clear evidence that male rats were developing cancerous heart tumors and other type of tumors. So basically getting cancer. We gave rats cancer with 2G and 3G. So they did some of the better studies do a consensus where they give it to an external panel that was not involved in the study, and every single one of those scientists agreed that unanimously that this stuff gave rats cancer. Okay, so that's a big deal. The second study, which will be more shocking than you'll even think if you haven't seen this before, your jaw may drop and you might be in disbelief. But 12 institutions across Europe participated in to see how much DNA damage was going to happen from cell phone use compared to x-rays. And they're also using, like, I believe 3G on their phones. They may be using 4G. They're certainly not using 5G in this study. So across the Europe, they did this at 12 different institutions that weren't in contact with each other, speaking different languages. And what did they find? They found that one day on a cell phone, one full day, nobody spends a day straight, but let's say hypothetically you were on the phone for a day, that would be equal to the same DNA damage as 1,600 chest x-rays according to the assay method they used to see how many strand breaks were happening to DNA. Okay, if that doesn't alarm the heck out of somebody and wake people up to saying this is a really big deal, I don't really know what would. So now let's cover the meat and potatoes here. How are EMFs and autism specifically, because the conference we're at, how are they linked? Well, there's different studies and different things. We're going to show you one very important way scientifically that these things are linked. Now, EMFs have been shown to cause cellular calcium imbalances. Okay, there's a calcium channel. It's like a little door on the membrane of your cell, lets in calcium or doesn't let in calcium, depending on if the cell supposedly needs it or doesn't. This does a lot of things. This changes the charge of your cell, which is important in almost all of the functioning and movements of the cell. And it does a lot of other things we'll get to in a second. So this is very important. So EMFs are causing a cellular calcium problem. Well, guess what? Cellular calcium problems are linked to autism. Dr. Martin Paul, who spoke here just a few years back at the Autism One conference, he said that EMFs could be the main cause of autism itself, okay, because he knows all this science and more that we're going to cover today. So EMFs causing cellular calcium may be a key factor that is influencing the possibility of getting autism. So in conclusion, a mini conclusion, real quick is everyone, especially autistic folks, should really pay attention to this subject big time. So there's a link between autism and cellular calcium, as we mentioned. Well, what's this link? So if you go to spectrumnews.org and you search for the article named New Autism Gene Points to Cellular Calcium Imbalance, that's the name of the article. You can read about it, but we'll just give you a couple of quick points. This study and others have found significant link between the calcium channel gene, that's the gene that makes the calcium channels. The calcium channels is which regulates, in other words, lets calcium in the cell or not, makes the calcium be balanced and imbalanced. So a significant link between the calcium channel gene and autism, okay? This is the CACNA16 gene. Well, these voltage-gated calcium channels play a critical role in autism according to this one study. Now, if you read the last note here, so basically they concluded if someone has this gene or has a problem with this gene, like not having this gene enough, then their calcium channels aren't going to be made as well. The calcium levels can be imbalanced, and those particular people were found to be more likely to develop autism. And they also think that this is a reason why boys are more likely to get autism than girls, because boys have more issues with this particular gene than girls do, which would explain why more boys are getting it potentially. So that's what this study talked about. Now, let's go talk about EMFs and calcium channels now. We know about autism and their link. What about EMFs and calcium channels? So the key of how an EMF harms us on a cellular level, harms humans at all, really, the only science that ever been shown to how we're being affected and harmed on a cellular level by EMFs, not a theory, but been shown over and over, is this calcium channel thing, okay? EMFs are causing our calcium channels to malfunction. That malfunction's leading to a bunch of things we'll talk about in a second. So let's watch this short video on this whole process of how EMFs are harming us and how they're related to what we call subatomic chaos and this calcium channel.
Let's see how. EMFs cause what is called subatomic chaos, which includes shaking and vibrating of tiny molecules in the environment. You can see this chaos clearly happening in a microwave oven. The shaking of molecules helps heat the food inside. Shockingly, the same frequencies are used in nearly all your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth devices. But, unlike a microwave oven, there are no walls keeping the radiation in. So it shakes and vibrates molecules all around, like in the floor you walk on, the seats you sit in, and the house you live in. This subatomic chaos causes a reaction in human cells. Simply put, EMFs cause subatomic chaos in our environment, which causes a door to open on our cells called a voltage-gated calcium channel, which overloads our cell with double ion calcium molecules, which causes a chain reaction of issues, including free radicals and DNA damage.
So that video was a great illustration, hopefully in layman terms, of the science about how EMFs are harming us and what's really going on here. So moving on, the root cause, so to understand this, the root cause of how EMFs are harming humans is this process where EMFs, not the ones that fly by and cruise by in through the wall by you and cruise out the wall and keep going on and on until they find a destination to get absorbed into, but the ones that actually got absorbed into the wall, into your bed, into your chair, into solid material, those create the subatomic chaos. They create the calcium channel. That creates the calcium channel malfunction, and so on. So this process is the root cause of how it's harming humans. Why is this very, very important? Because we don't have to address the EMF. We don't have to avoid the EMF because the EMF can't hurt you directly. Okay? An X-ray can hurt you directly, but these EMFs are against the laws of physics, says the electrical engineers and physicists 101. against the laws of physics to directly harm our DNA and to directly hurt our cell. So we have found the process, this indirect process where it causes, number one, causes the second domino, subatomic chaos, which causes the third domino, and then the fourth domino, meaning all the problems we get in our cell. And I guess you could say a fifth domino would be potential symptoms, fatigue and all the things we talked about. Now, why is this key? Because we don't have to, again, we don't have to block EMFs and address these. If we did, the products would stop working. You wouldn't have a cell phone. You wouldn't have a Wi-Fi router. They wouldn't work anymore because you're blocking the EMFs. And second of all, blocking can make it worse, and we'll get to that. So what we concentrate on to fix this problem is addressing the second domino, which we call subatomic chaos, because if you address that properly, then number 3 and number 4 wouldn't happen, and you got a great solution. So that's what the key to understanding this. That's why it's so important to understand the root cause of this. If you're going to fix a problem, you need to know what's broken. And so if you've got a car that doesn't work, it's broken, and you think it's the spark plugs, so you put new spark plugs in the car, but really you have a transmission problem and the transmission's busted, the car's not going to work, okay? You can't take a rusted out something and paint over it and think you fixed the rust. That's not the cause, okay? You got to find the root cause of it. And you need to understand the root cause of how EMFs are hurting us so that you can properly address it. And that's what we do. And that's what I think any solution should do. So to review, the key to all EMF symptoms, and one important key to autism, is the calcium channel malfunction and the calcium levels. Therefore, this predicts the calcium levels in the cell, whether they're correct or they're all out of whack. So what can we do about all this? Well, the most important thing to do is get the solution that effectively addresses the subatomic chaos, which can stop the calcium channel issue, which can stop the snowball of other effects. That's what we talked about. So this is really amazing and cool. There was a breakthrough study on cellular calcium and EMS related in 2021. It was an independent lab in Texas. They tested, in multiple studies actually, they tested thousands. Each study had a minimum of 4,000 like human cells that were tested. The level of calcium in each cell. The router was put within 12 inches of the cells, and things were measured with and without that router there. They were measured with and without fixing these EMF problems with products and so on. So what was the result here? So the result of this was, the first result was when these cells were near the EMF radiation from a Wi-Fi router, the calcium levels in the cells were drastically altered in a very short time. So they were altered by 2 to 4 times in some very important cells with L channels, which is, the cells that are in some of the most important cells in your body. They increased 2 to 4 times the levels. That's a lot of depolarization of your cell. That's a lot of issue. That's not good at all. Other kinds of cells were decreasing calcium by up to 85% in a very short time. That poses a hyperpolarization issue and causes all kinds of problems as well. So these were not good results. By the way, this study was in sync with lots of other studies. We know of 20 some other studies that did this already. So this basically reproved what was already proven. And the cells with the L-type calcium channels, like we mentioned, were seem to be some of the most affected by this. That's brain cells, muscle cells, heart cells, lungs. I mean, they're all over your body, but these cells tend to have the most L channels and the most calcium channels, which means it's very important. That's how your heart pumps, these charges coming in and out. And if you didn't have that working, your heart wouldn't be pumping. So this is very important stuff. Now the results, again, were consistent with a bunch of other studies that we mentioned. Now result 2 is where the cool stuff happens. So when our solutions were applied to these cells in an incubator exposed to these EMFs, the calcium levels were normalized. To our knowledge, this is the first time in history that this has ever been shown, ever been attempted. Scientifically, our products are working on the root cause of how EMFs are affecting you. And so this is just one of the graphs made by the head scientists here. This is showing fibroblast cells that that had EMFs, skyrocket near a router and then come back to normal when our products were applied properly. So that's key. Now, for more information on what solutions we offer, how this worked, what we did to fix this problem and to fix your problem, of course, come to see our booth. And this in particular is some of the results of the study. Now, our solutions work. Like I said, come to our booth. But let's go over some other ways that you can protect your family and yourself from these EMFs. Now, first important note, this is some good advice below, but you don't have to follow this advice below if you have solutions that really work. Just note that. It's very key, because this advice is kind of common. People say turn off your Wi-Fi at night. Like, it's very common advice people say, because that's going to lower the amount of EMFs in your house. It's a good advice. If you have your Wi-Fi completely remediated, then this is not important at all to do. But if you don't, this is important. If you don't have it remediated, avoid using as many Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices as often as you can. Very important to do. Your cell phone is glued to you probably, so this is very hard to do. So we suggest obviously fixing it. And of course, if you have a solution that works, you wouldn't have to worry about them. Now, these are things we suggest keep out of the bedroom. Gaming stations have a very high amount of EMF radiation, not just off the station itself, but off the controller as well. So we advise please fix them, or even if you don't fix them, if you do or don't fix them, we kind of suggest don't put these in the bedroom. Bedroom's like the pristine place where you should have the best environment to not affect your rest and repair as you're sleeping. So we suggest just don't put these in the bedroom. Baby monitors, you might have to because you have a baby, but I really hope if you don't remediate this, if you don't properly fix your baby monitor, please don't use it. This is horrible for a baby who's more affected by EMFs than you are, and you're putting basically a router right up in their business when they're sleeping. It's an awful thing to do. So please fix it if you're going to use a baby monitor in the room. And then there's a controller just to show you that the controller is important too. So this is a list of things that you should avoid in the bedroom or extra super remediate, because these actually are harder to fix, like we mentioned. So any spinning electrical motor has a different kind of EMF called a front and back EMF. And they create an EMF that's disruptive and it's not good, but it's much harder to fix because of the nature of the EMF. So we suggest to keep these either out of your bedroom or keep them as far from your bed as possible and over extra remediate them. So that's fans, that's air purifiers, that's AC units, dehumidifiers, humidifiers, and anything else that has a good fan on it. Keep these out of the bedroom, of course. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi devices of any kind, like especially a router or a Wi-Fi printer, Alexa, Google Home. I could add computers and lots of other things too. When you're sleeping, get these away from you. Here's a piece of advice. So, absorbable magnesium. This is a great thing to take that helps prevent the calcium channels from malfunctioning. So if you do have a lot of good magnesium, and magnesium's hard to get in your body, so get a good absorbable kind of magnesium, then this is just a little extra protection about the process of how EMFs are hurting us. And so this is very important for everyone, especially, in my opinion, if you have autism. This is a very good vitamin to be adding for this reason. So what things should you avoid doing? Well, you should avoid blocking EMFs. And I know this is like the first go-to for most people. They say, well, I don't want them. First of all, it's almost impossible to block them. You can't block everything everywhere in modern society. You have cell towers. You have all the devices we have. You now have the 5G low orbit satellites. You could be in the Rocky Mountains. You're getting hit hard by this radiation now. I mean, there's no escaping it. But blocking EMFs can actually make it worse. So here's one example. If you're painting your room or you're painting your house and using the tinted windows that keep all the EMFs out of your house. The problem is it's like a microwave oven. If you keep the EMFs from the outside ones from getting in, then you're also keeping the ones inside from getting out. And a microwave oven wouldn't work if you turned it on and took the walls off. It wouldn't heat any food because the radiation escapes. It needs to create a lot of subatomic chaos to heat that food up. And you don't want to do this in your house because everything electrical and all the EMFs in the house would bounce around in the house, creating more subatomic chaos and could potentially make it much worse. So we just say, please don't do this. Things to avoid, and this goes for, don't block your smart meter either. It's the same thing. It's taking all the EMFs right back at you. It's redirecting them in the wrong place. So this is really good advice. Things to avoid: measuring EMFs with a meter. You can definitely use a meter, but we're going to say be very careful because a meter is going to give you insanely incorrect results on a regular basis. If you don't know how to read the meter and you don't have a meter to measure everything, which there's almost no meter to measure 5G now, unless you have a super expensive one, you're not going to measure all the EMFs anyway. And even if you did, the meters measure what does not hurt you, which is the EMF itself, because a lot of them cruise by and they're not absorbed in anything yet. That's why you're reading them. And it ignores what does hurt you, which is all the EMFs that got absorbed in everything that's creating the subatomic chaos, that's creating an environment that could affect my calcium channels and so on, like we covered. So it's giving you a false reading. So if you look at this, remember the meter's measuring the EMF over here, which is impossible to directly hurt you. That's what physicists say. So it's measuring what can't hurt you, and it's ignoring the subatomic chaos and the absorbed radiation, which causes this chain reaction. So we say be very careful of using meters like this environment's good or not. You just don't. Other things to avoid, because these are just too hard to fix: bladeless fans, cell phone watches, earbuds, and white noise makers. These are all real bad, so bad that they're just too hard to fix effectively. And we just say, even with our wonderful solutions, we just say it's really best to avoid them. So that's all we have for today. So if you have any questions, of course, I'll take any now if there's time. And then please come to our booth. Here's where it's located, and we hope to see you there.